I feel like I had enough under my belt to start my own thing, because I always like the old-fashioned made in America type of stuff. Like I wanted to kind of bring that
Love that.
that manufacturing proudness back to the United States, because in fact one of my first logos was the American flag with the stars and a circle because
Love it.
and people are like, why is that? I'm like, well, that's the American Revolution flag, and we want to revolutionize manufacturing in America.
Hey, everybody, this is Chuck for the Revenue Fuel Podcast, and I have with me my friend Ernest Werble from Werble Microwave. Ernest and I met about 8 years ago. We connected on LinkedIn. Heck, I don't even know how we met. We just saw each other at a trade show last week, and heck, maybe that's where we met the first time. But honest to God, I'm thrilled because I just like this guy. I met him when he was just starting his business, and he just, I don't know. You're just going to like him as much as I do. I promise you that. Ernest, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for making this possible.
Oh, no worries. Hey, it's fun, man. That's what we're here to do, is have fun. So, very cool. So I want to jump right into it. The whole thing is that I'm just fascinated with entrepreneurs. I am fascinated with people who take the leap, fascinated with people who make it succeed, and you are well on your way. So I really want to know, why did you get started? Why did you start this business?
Well, I had worked in a couple of different places, and I learned a lot, and they were good places to work, good environments, good people.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of faced some limitations, personal growth limitations, as far as things
Mm-hmm.
that I could do, things that I could create.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I would be like, oh, well, how come we don't do something this way? How come we don't, why can't we make this type of product? And I was more or less told, well, this is the way it is, and this is what we've always done. Okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not against that or anything. I understand we have to have rules and procedures. And
Mm-hmm.
now, after being in the business, I'm the guy who has to explain to my employees, right?
Turnabout's fair play. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I always wanted to do more. And when you're in your 20s, you're very ambitious. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
still consider myself ambitious, but I can more channel that energy and focus it more on the task at hand. That being said, I can give you, well, prior to that, I would go back to when I was like a teenager, and my
Mm-hmm.
grandparents passed.
Yeah, I
And,
love this.
well, so what happened was we were cleaning out their house in Brooklyn, and they had
Mm-hmm.
like a whole bunch of old electronics, like radios, stereos, VCR, all the technology of the time. And so this stuff that they had accumulated was stuff from the 60s and 70s and 80s, that technology.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that's important is because my parents, we were cleaning out the house, they were going to throw all that stuff in the garbage. And in those
Mm-hmm.
days, this was the 90s at that point, um, you could just throw that stuff in the garbage. There was
Mm-hmm.
no e-waste recycling and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, look, if we're going to throw it away, I was like 12, 13 years old at the time. I'm like, if we're going to throw it out anyway, can I take it apart? I want to see what's inside. Let me just tear into this.
Nice.
And my parents were like, yeah, just don't get electrocuted. And so I did. And the reason that the era of the technology, so in the 80s and earlier, it wasn't like today where everything's a board with a chips on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was hand-wired components. You had
Mm-hmm.
the leaded resistors. You remember all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So it was intriguing to me because as a young child, a radio was this magic talking box on my nightstand.
Mm-hmm.
And then I open this thing up and I see all these wires and components and different colors. I was amazed, like the resistors with the colored bands. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, this was the old it was old then, and it's still old. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was really intriguing. And then what I got from that, which I use later in life, some of the stuff I was able to get working. Most of it just ended up being scrapped.
Mm-hmm.
The console TVs, by the way, had the best speakers. Um, yeah, you could get like really nice, like 6-inch speakers out of them. But yeah, what I really took out of that was that in those days, a lot of it was handmade,
Mm-hmm.
and it was made to be serviced by a TV technician.
Yeah, sure.
So it had to be built in such a way. It was like a puzzle. Getting it apart
Mm-hmm.
showed me in my mind, and I was still a teenager. My mind was still developing more, and it was like I would start to get this 3D
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think that's what really helped me learn to think in 3D by taking all this stuff. And then, of course, when I was in high school age, my hobby was like this. So this is around the year 2000. People would throw out computers and TVs and stuff on the side of the road, and I would just take them home and take them apart. You know, at that point I was driving, and
Mhm.
and I loved doing that. I made a little money selling the good parts on eBay, but mainly for me it was almost like a high. Like, what am I going to open up? What kind of new stuff am I going to see in there? Like, what kind of new? I would see all kinds of strange schemes, like the TVs that had the rotary dials
Mhm.
were very intricate. But then
Mhm.
before they went, there was a period of time in the 70s, early 80s where they tried to implement push button controls, but inside of it was still electromechanical parts.
Mhm.
So you
Yes.
actually had like relays and drums turning, but it gave you the operator had the feel of pushing a button to get to the next channel, but it was actually like things, mechanical things happening in there. Um, Zenith Space Command actually used tuning forks. You pushed a button and it made a tone, two slightly different frequencies, and somehow there was a resonator in there that would tell it, oh yes, channel up or channel down. I got into all this cool stuff. Like, now again, it's almost boring. It's just like a board with chips on it.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
so I feel like
So,
I caught the tail end of the cool stuff. Sorry.
well, for context for the folks out in the audience, uh, what we're talking about here is RF and microwave. And when I say that to people who don't understand what the technology is, they think microwave oven, of course.
Yeah, I've heard
And
that too many times.
yeah, right. And I spent, and they think, and it's electronics. It's high frequency electronics. And they hear electronics and immediately think in computers. And my mom thought that I sold computers for years. She just didn't quite understand. When in reality, it's a great big wireless world out there, from everything from telecommunications and Wi-Fi to defense and radar and satellite communications and all kinds of different applications. And that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about, for the customers that you're working with and that I have worked with in the past, we're talking about technologies that people won't even learn about for 10 or 20 years, and in some cases may never learn about them. Not just because it may not be the kind of thing that they understand well, but it might be the kind of thing that is used in programs where they don't really want you to know the technology, because it keeps us safe.
Yeah.
In this modern world. So it's a very, very different world, and I love hearing someone whose interest and entrepreneurship is born from this kind of passion, this kind of intellectual curiosity. And when you couple the curiosity with the intellect, boom, you have such amazing things. So that's so cool to hear. So what keeps you going? I mean, so you get in. It's a big leap from teenager exploring technology to someone who is working for someone else, decides to start their own business because a lot of other things get in the way. Payroll, information systems, accounting, quality, all these different things that you have to do. All that gets in the way, and people find, I'm going to go do what I love, and then they find out they're running a business, and they didn't know whether they would love that or not. So what keeps you going?
Or the business is running me. But
Or the business is running you. Any entrepreneurs ever heard that story? Yeah, I bet they have. They've lived it.
yeah, so I kind of jumped back and forth. But yeah, so after high school, I went to County College of Morris, and I was studying electronics. 'Cause I always wanted to do something with electronics. I actually wanted to be a TV, radio repair guy, but I was born a little too late for that. So I said, all right, well, let me see what I could learn, and I like taking stuff apart. And so I took the technician route. And then while I was there, I got an internship, which I ended up staying at, tuning RF microwave couplers. And so what intrigued me about that was, well, two main things. One is, like the stuff that I described earlier, like you'd open up a TV, there was actual parts wired up.
Mm-hmm.
When you open up a Wilkinson power divider, it's the geometry that determines how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, you've got some chip resistors and things, but for the most part, 99% of determining if the product will work or not is the printed lines on the board. Everything has to be tightly controlled, the lengths, the widths, and geometry. And then I would build couplers, and I would build at this point I was just assembling them, and I would build 10 pieces, and I was told half of them worked, half of them didn't, and I'm like, I don't understand. I built them all the same way. Like, I felt bad. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I followed the instructions, and then they're like, well, no, that's RF. That's how it works. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, all right. They're like, oh, your stuff is failing. I'm like, what am I doing?
It's not like an easy bake oven is what you're telling me. You know, threw a few ingredients, mix them up, and throw them under the light bulb. It just comes out. It's close enough.
No. Way different. So yeah, I mean, and then through different jobs that I've had, I progressed upward, but I kind of felt like, okay, I could be doing a little bit more. Like, I want to get into my problem was I didn't know where to channel it. I wanted to create things. I wanted to design. I'm like, give me something to design. I don't know, just give me something to design. But I was like, okay. Eventually, I kind of got more level-headed, and I moved up into engineering and project management and dealing with suppliers and quality. So I got all that knowledge. And then a couple of jobs that I worked at was during a busy time, and then they got slow, and I was laid off. So I said at that point, I was 29 years old, and I'm like, you know what? It's now or never. Let me just try. I feel like I had enough under my belt to start my own thing, because I always like the old-fashioned made in America type of stuff. Like, I wanted to kind of bring that manufacturing proudness back to the United States, because in fact one of my first logos was the American flag with the stars and a circle, because and people are like, why is that? I'm like, well, that's the American Revolution flag, and we want to revolutionize manufacturing in America. So you know, and then from there, I don't know if it well, yes, it does kind of correlate to this. I didn't get any loans. I didn't get any other than credit cards. I didn't get any investors. The only thing I got from anybody was my dad was like, hey, you can use my garage as a rent-free space. So I moved back home. I started it, and I funded it. I funded everything with life savings and credit cards, because I said, I want to do this. And I didn't have any customers. I just got on the phone and started cold calling. Hey, my name is Ernest Werbel. I started a company, and I design couplers and power dividers, and can I be a supplier for you? I mean, I probably said it a little more goofy than that at the time, but I was just like, yeah, my full-time job is to now find a job, but I want to do it in the capacity of my business. And to answer your question now, fast forward 9 years, what keeps me going? I mean, now I have a lot of people depending on me. I mean, I still have the drive to create new things, and I love that. But I have to remember, like, whenever we all have days that we're down. You know, my dad's been gone 5 years now, so it's sometimes like I have to push myself. And I say, but you know what? Yeah, maybe my dad can't see me doing this anymore, but I've got 15 employees depending on me for their checks. I've got all these customers depending on me for the products. And I feel like I'm a part. Like, I have a place in the world doing this. That's what I like. I mean, when I go to shows now, people recognize me, and I'm not saying it from like an ego perspective. It feels good to know that, hey, I'm needed in some capacity. Like, I'm not just sitting in the lab, and that's why we're doing here. I found myself kind of just like sitting in the lab in the corner. Okay, I'll work on my design. I'll test some parts. We'll ship it out. Like, yeah, that was fun and all, but it's like, how many power dividers can you make? Eventually, you want to do something more than just what you're doing for yourself and your name.
Yep.
And that's...
Well, all great businesses, I mean, truly, all great businesses are born from passion. And that's all I can hear in everything as you tell me this story. That's really what it's about. Why do what you love? You'll never work a day in your life, because that's born from passion. Again, eventually running a business becomes more than that. But if you can never lose the passion, then it's easy. It's easy to lead a business. It's easy to lead employees, because they're going to believe what you believe. And you and the employees, you execute a shared mission with a shared values. I mean, who doesn't want that in their 9 to 5 or 7 to 10, whatever it ends up being for the entrepreneur?
Yeah.
So
one thing I'd like to add to that, to anybody who might be on the fence, thinking about, should I or should I not start something like this? Just do it, because you know what really pushed me over the edge? I was like, you know what? I could probably get another engineering job tomorrow if I really pound the pay. I said, I do not want to get, like at that time I was 29 years old. I said, what is worse at this point is saying, you know what, I'm just going to work somewhere, this and that, and then get to age 75 or 80 and look back thinking, man, if I started that company 50 years ago, where could it be today? That's what I was more worried about than failing. I mean, believe me, I worry every day. How am I going to pay bills, make payrolls? I mean, you naturally have to worry about that, especially because the company's grown. It's not just me and myself in my parents' garage anymore. It's like I have to pay rent. I have, like I said, all the obligations. But I don't think if, you know, looking back, if I knew all the stress that I would have, I probably still would have done it, because not doing it and then getting to that point in life where you don't have the time anymore, you know, at that point, yeah, you could still do it, but you don't have the time. It's like I'd rather.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have other priorities, other things get in the way. I mean, you have mouths to feed. You have whatever the heck that is. I mean, heck, I'm 57 years old, still have a kid in college, and that changes your thought process for sure. So I've recommended the same exact thing to my son. Right now, he's got one more semester to go. He's finishing college. He has a job. Kevin, if you can be an entrepreneur, if that is your destiny, make it happen as soon as you can in life. Better yet, do it while you can still lean on mom and dad, honestly, because, you know, we love you. We're your biggest fans, and that's the time to really strike out on your own. However, people do it at all ages, and crazier things have happened, but certainly that's good advice. And, you know, with a passion, my God, I mean, when are you more passionate in your life than when you're young?
Yeah.
Honestly.
But I would say, too, I mean, if somebody doesn't want, I mean, it's not for everybody, and there's no shame in that.
Not.
Like, you got some people that, hey, I just want to come in and build widgets. That's fine. We need that, too.
Absolutely. We do. It's what I call, there's dreamers, drivers, doers, and drones. And no business can exist or certainly thrive if everyone's a dreamer or everyone's a driver, if everyone's a doer, or certainly not if everyone's a drone. You need a healthy mix of all of those. Someone to, you know, set that vision, someone to push every day, someone to make sure that the work is done every day, and those who sometimes are just, I'm going to follow orders, I'm going to do what I'm told to the best of my ability. That's it. And they want to come in, put in their time, and go home. And you need them. So it's not for everybody. In fact, as a system, the world doesn't work if everyone wants to be in charge.
Yeah.
So
that's how you have all the craziness in the world.
Amen. Amen. So what do you think? What's the number one thing you need to keep growing your business moving forward?
Well, admittedly, I've been weak on the branding and marketing part, because I got to the point, like, I was so involved in the day-to-day stuff. So now I got a marketing guy helping me. Obviously doing this with you, and you've pushed me over the edge a lot with that. I appreciate that, because, you know, I was kind of like a shy. I mean, I'm an engineer. You know, I want to just stay in the lab and stuff. But I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll put myself out there more. I'll get over this fear of judgment. I will just, you know, you like me, you don't, you don't. I mean, I'm almost 40 years old. I'm kind of at the point where I don't care about that stuff anymore. Like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I can make. I like to make new things. I'm sure there's no. And not to trivialize, but couplers and power dividers, I mean, they've been around for decades, right? But I still feel like we innovate, we optimize, we can come up with something that can meet the customer's needs. And I'm sorry, what was the question? Oh, to expand?
So what do you need to make it work? So you've coming out from behind the lab bench, you've hired a marketing guy, and you're getting out there, and, you know, what do you think it's going to take to grow the business?
Well, we want to get some more customers, always important. Now I'm talking practical. Expanding into a new place. There is another office in this building that's a little bigger that we're trying to get approval to. It's going to involve some construction stuff, so we're going to have to.
Cool.
It's a slow process. But yeah, we've really maximized all the space. Like, we've maximized all the space that we've used here, even with taking walls down and things. There's just no more room for anything. So yeah, that's on the roadmap for within a year. AS9100, I'd like to get us to at some point. We're ISO 9001, but I think
Mm-hmm.
just not that we're going to be making satellite parts tomorrow, but I want to have the mindset in place about the quality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just the mindset. We have to continue to improve and adopt our mindsets.
Mm-hmm. Well, that attitude is everything. And, for those that aren't familiar with those quality systems, ISO 9001, AS 9100, 9102, those are crucial because that's exactly what they do. They put the proper procedures in place. They create a framework that allows you to succeed way, 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 way more times than you do not. And when you do not succeed, you don't pass the problems on to your customer.
Yeah,
And that's really what it's about. And so it changes the attitude of your business. It's one thing to get it up and out the door. I can tell you, I've worked with companies who built devices and weren't able to do it a second time.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The documentation's important. How making a batch quantity, making it so that anybody else can do it. And I have to hand off to my team because a lot of these guys, they're in college age. They have great ideas. They have questions. They're, I'll design something new, and then we'll get the parts, and we'll say, all right, we're going to do a first run of, say, 10 pieces. But I'm not building those 10 pieces. I will test my ability to document, and I'll give it to one of my engineering guys and say, okay, you build them from my instructions, and if they don't come out right, it's my fault, not yours, because you're following my instructions. And then we go back and forth and say, okay, how do we make this more clear? Do we make photos with leaders and all of this stuff? And now a lot of the products that we make are at the point where, almost anybody off the street who has a basic, you can use a screwdriver, you can do the job. We've made the documentation that robust because you need to build redundancy too. I mean, you can't say have your process depend on one person who's an expert and then that guy's out sick and then
That's exactly right.
we can't make that part for 4 days.
Right, exactly. Well, you have to plan everything for attrition because everybody goes on vacation. God forbid God forbid they do get sick or worse. And it takes that systems thinking, right? Everything is not necessarily guaranteed by design, but your probability of success goes up because you've designed in the process documentation you've designed for success so that you don't have to do it all. The greatest dream of any solopreneur is to graduate to entrepreneur. Okay, and then from entrepreneur to grow the business from there. And that demands that you multiply yourself. And that, in order to multiply yourself, it absolutely demands systems thinking. That is, you can achieve by being able to delegate to others with training, documentation, repetition, practice, measurement, feedback, all of these different things. And you do that in a proper framework. And that applies not only to the things that you're building and manufacturing, but it applies to selling and marketing and every other thing.
That was a very hard thing for me to get over, and I still struggle with it because I was always kind of like, oh, well, I want to get into it and do it all myself, but then I realized you can't do it all. You can't. You got to be able to trust. Sometimes, like, somebody else will do something 90% of the way that I would do it, and I have to accept, you know what? At the end of the day, the part's going to work. The customer's going to receive it. They'll be happy. Let it go.
That's right. And you use the magic word. The magic word is trust. There's not a lot of room. I mean, you can have control freaks and table pounders out there that go out and they can succeed, but they're not going to generate a lot of loyalty. Certainly, they're not going to generate a lot of loyalty with their customers and their employees for the right reasons. So it's always fleeting, if you will. Nobody wants to follow them. Certainly, no one wants to be around them. So, and that comes from that word trust. And trust is born from empathy. It's born from being authentically yourself, being adaptive, agile, and being able to adjust on the fly. Yeah, I trust them. You know what? And stuff happens. Mistakes happen. Keep them small. Fix them fast. No problem. Move on.
One thing about that too is there was an analogy that I've heard of called fleas in a jar. Basically, if you have
I'm getting the willies.
Well, it's not that bad, but it makes a good sense. I don't know how true this is, but if you have fleas in a jar, they're going to jump out. If you put fleas in a jar and now you put a glass lid over it, they're going to jump up, they're going to hit their heads, and then they're going to stay back down. Now, if you remove the glass lid, they will stay in the jar because they know where the limit is. And the analogy is when people come to you with ideas and suggestions and questions, don't beat them down. Oh, this won't work. We don't do it this way. I tell them, look, because a lot of the documentation, the ideas came from the guys on my team because they're the ones doing the work most of the time.
Yes.
So I said, look, customer wants it done a certain way, and we have to do it a certain way because that's what they've given us the agreement. We've made when we certify a product, we certify that it's to what they've said. So the thing is, we have to finish this job that way, but I like your idea. Let's take a few pieces, put them on the side, and try that experiment our own way. Or maybe I know, hey, I've tried it and it won't work, but I'll give them the explanation. Yeah, I tried that 3 years ago, and this is why it didn't work. But I don't want to limit the creativity, because the best ideas come from the people who are actually doing the work. And admittedly, now I'm not, like we said before, payroll, quality, accounting. I'm not building 100 pieces a day anymore. I'm having my guys do it, and they're the soldiers on the ground that are, they have to report back what they're seeing. And I have to take that advice to heart and say, okay, maybe there is a better way, and a lot of times there is. But when I'm one guy doing it myself and it's all in my head, then I have to realize you have 10 people come in here as 10 different perspectives. They see it from a different angle. On one hand, they have to learn my way of doing it, but on the other hand, they may have ideas that I wouldn't even have thought of because they've seen it in other capacities. So.
Yeah, and while you certainly can't do this on a shop floor, I always say that brainstorming is best done around a round table with beer. And that's because it fosters that creativity, and it allows you to lead by letting other people enter the spotlight. I don't want to stay in the spotlight. I don't want to stay the center of attention. I want to allow people to develop on their own. And that's one hell of a leadership quality that you've just demonstrated and shared with us, that you're willing to set aside some stuff so that people can just experiment on their own and develop themselves and learn to trust you as their leader. Is that Ernest believes in me, and he's willing to let me learn and try. And the worst thing that happens is one or both of us learn something. And that's tremendous leadership.
Thank you. And maybe you destroy a part or something like that. Okay. But the thing is, we learned not to do it that way again. And maybe it works out successfully. Okay. Maybe that 1 hour you spent on that idea with that part now saves 10 minutes per piece that we make in the future. Well, that's huge. A 100-piece order. You're going to make that time back. And you just become more efficient. You just optimize. Even something as simple as like fixturing, like my guys, so I knew nothing about 3D printers. I bought one. Yep. I tried a few years ago, and I couldn't get it to work, and I just said, you know what, forget about it. But I've got several people now who they love 3D printing. They're doing this stuff at their house. I'm like, all right, fine. You know what? Tell me the model you want. We'll get one. It's a few $100. Like, we'll get one. We'll bring it in here, and we get these ideas. Like, just having some fixture made at a machine shop costs like 10 times what the 3D printer would do.
Absolutely.
So it's worth it. I'm like, okay, now, and it creates that collaborative environment where I can tell them, all right, we need some coil bending fixture, and this is I'll bend one and I'll say, this is the sample. This is what I need us to be able to stamp out hundreds of these, make a fixture. You guys just figure it out and let me know when it's done, and that's it. I don't micromanage that stuff.
And the aptitude and the knowledge and the skill set don't always have to have a college degree attached to them.
Oh yeah.
And
Agreed.
You bring up something. The people from your organization are going home and doing 3D printing on their own time. I can tell you, I personally did a deployment of technology into a distribution center, and we were doing on that day, on the rollout day, I had about a dozen people in front of me, and the most knowledgeable person in that entire room was someone who worked in the warehouse. And almost all of the conversation was directed at that person because we knew who was going to be answering the questions after the deployment was over. They'd come for the hard stuff to us and get the support that they needed. But for the day-to-day easy stuff, they knew they had a resource. So they let this person rise to the top, let him be the cream. And he's a warehouse worker. You don't always have to be a degreed individual. and be white collar to have the skills. And to recognize that as a leader, once again, that's what it's about. That's how you develop those employees who follow you for life, if that's what they're destined to do.
Yeah, so. The thing that I ended up kind of taking away from this whole experience as a person was, it's not that I have to do it all, it's that I have to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, it is my name on the company and I'm responsible for everything, but I don't have to do everything. I can get out of my own way, let the people be creative and figure things out, and allow some mistakes as long as it's not critical to the customer and the application or the equipment, you know what I mean? But if, like I said, in the case of, all right, here's an extra part, we already shipped the order, here's an extra piece, mess around. If you mess it up, it's not a big deal, but try it. You might find something that works better.
Well, I like to tell my wife, my job as father and husband is to make sure. Insert whatever situation you want. Make sure that we have a roof. Make sure that we can eat. Make sure that if we get injured, we keep them small and make them learning opportunities and not debilitating. We do our best to do that every day. And hopefully we succeed far, far, far more times than we do not. My job is to make sure. And that's very much what you're describing. Let them go out and live their lives. Let them go out and make the product. Let them go out and make your customers delightfully happy. And just make sure. Make sure that we meet the requirements. Make sure that my team grows in the process. And make sure that we all find a way to enjoy ourselves for all these hours a day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's really what it's out. So, once again, I can hear your passion is, now I know why you keep going. It's not just that you love the technology. You love the people.
Yeah.
You love the process. I can hear you love the entire process of being an entrepreneur and being able to realize these things. And it's amazing. But so, what are the big obstacles? What's going on out there in the industry and in industry and business in general? What are the obstacles to your growth plan, do you think?
Well, I mean, admittedly, we've gotten into a market where there's a lot of competition.
Sure.
A lot of cheap, low-quality stuff out there. And the thing is, we're not going to compete with the overseas because they're making a finished product for less than my materials cost. Even if I try to buy the materials from overseas, it costs me, and my time is free. I don't know how, but I guess the shipping, whatever. But it still costs me more than they could sell a finished product. But then here's what happens, and I try to tell my customers this. You buy the part from over there, and then 3 months later you have a problem, and then you find out that they went out of business or they changed their names. But I've been here 9 years. I put my name on it, and the value I feel that we bring is the fact that I'm designing the parts too. I can provide the technical support. I can provide the customer service. I mean, you're not just buying my parts; you're buying me in a sense. Like you're getting me, and all my customers. They'll get my personal cell phone number. I tell them, look, nights, weekends, you need me, you call me. Don't worry about it. Like if there's any question about something, like I'm here for you. Whereas a lot of the bigger companies, it's like it'll take weeks just to get to somebody, and then you say one word wrong. Oh, that's not my department. I got to send you to somebody else. It's like no, like I'm the guy who has the answers. My team is knowledgeable too. If I'm out of the office or something, you can talk to somebody. I tell them, like, guys, we got to answer the phone. We got to get within 24 to 48 hours. We got to get back to emails. Like we've got to do this stuff. We have. Because at the end of the day, we're not selling parts to companies. We're selling them to people. People are using our parts. What is the worst feeling in the world than being ignored? I've done my cold calling and I've gotten yelled at a whole bunch of times. I mean, now it's at first I was like shaking, but now it's almost funny to me. But at least if I get yelled at, screamed at, it's almost like, all right, at least they've acknowledged me. Whereas if I mean, there's some level of comfort to that because it's like, all right, I got acknowledged as another human being. But if somebody just ignores you, that's the worst feeling in the world. So I don't want to do that to customers, even if I got people knocking on the door looking for work. I try to acknowledge them, say, look, we don't use those parts that you're offering or something, because I realize at the end of the day, it's still a person on the other end.
Well, and I don't think that can be underscored, bold, italicized, and enough exclamation points. People want to buy from people. They do need a product, but they want to buy the product from somebody that they know, like, and trust. someone with whom they can have a relationship, preferably for the rest of their career, maybe even for the rest of their life, because I've seen that happen too. And it doesn't sound like it's realistic, but people make friends for life in business. And that is real. And the sooner that entrepreneurs realize that, the sooner that people who have decided that they need to take on a new growth strategy realize that it's about the personal connection, the sooner they're going to be able to grow the way they dream, the way they imagine. I know it sounds fluffy. I know it sounds feel good, kumbaya. But I can tell you there's enough stories out there. I've heard it over and over and over again. Most importantly, I've seen it.
I still
and it is real.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go.
No, I still have, from 2014, 2015, first year in business, I still have the first customers, and they still come to me with projects.
Well, so that's one of my questions. Why do they love you so much? I think I already know the answer. But what do you think?
Well, I mean, the thing is, we've helped them with a lot of things when like nobody else wanted to do certain things. Either the requirement was difficult, or the quantity was too small, stuff like that. And I'll admit, not every project that I've taken was a slam dunk. But I don't run away from it. Like I said, look, all right, this is taking longer. We had bad materials, or sometimes just flat out admit, hey, I designed this on paper, on simulation, everything looked like it should work, and when we go to build it, things are not working. I'm going to need another 2 weeks or whatever. I'm really sorry, but I've never had to, what's the word, like you turn away from it. I mean, I've no bid stuff, but once I've taken on a project, I've always seen it to the end. I've never had to just back away and say, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you. It may not be on time, and we strive to be on time with all the commercial grade products, the stuff that we've been doing, the catalog items. Those are proven products. I'm more like talking about the design experimental type of things, because we do those things too. But yeah, I mean, in some way or form, we've always gotten it done at the end, at the 11th hour. We've gotten it done, and I feel that's also made us stronger as a group, because when you're back, well, it's like when you're fat and happy, life's too easy sometimes. When your back's against the wall, you start thinking creative. Like that reptilian brain starts to work, like survival. Like, I got to get this done. I've come in early in the morning, like sometimes 5 a.m. I'm thinking, oh, I got the whole day in front of me. I'm going to get so much stuff done, and I don't get anything done. And then all of a sudden, like around this, like 6 o'clock is when I get this fire. Like, man, I wasted the whole day, and then I'd end up getting like an 8 hours worth of work done in 2 hours, because it's like sometimes you need that pressure, and you don't want to have it all the time.
Of course.
But I think to get back to what you're asking, the fact that I can handle that and communicate with the customer, give them regular updates, don't just disappear. All right, even when things are going well, hey, we shipped your parts today, or we shipped your parts early, here's the tracking number. Just a one-line thing. You got to constantly keep that, the emotional bank, right? You want to keep positivity going so that when you have to take the negative, you can. And I'm not saying that from a point of manipulation. It's just that you don't want to be the guy where every time they hear your name come up, there's a problem. Right? Especially with the customers you do regular business with. You want to be just like, at least weekly, just touch base. Hey, just so you know, your order's still being processed. Because people like to know. I like to know. Like, I'll send an order to a machine shop or whatever, and I'm expecting, on the day that they promise, I'm expecting to get it. And a lot of times that happens, and it's great. Sometimes it's late, and it's like, okay, you guys could have just told me a week ago, because then I could have planned we were planning on getting those parts at that time, so that then I can run production and have the boards get put in the housings, whatever. So if you're going to be late, I understand things happen. Okay, that's okay. Most of the time, a week or so is not going to kill us, but let us know. So I remember how I feel, and that's why I try to tell the customers, hey, we may be running behind here and there. It happens. We're sorry. We'll do whatever we can to move this to the front of the line, but we couldn't get parts on time, or whatever the reason is.
Interestingly enough, I think that there's two kinds of people when it comes to these interactions. One, silence is good news. If I don't hear anything, I assume everything's going as expected. Two, silence is bad news. Either way, if it's bad news, if they assume that it's bad news, make sure you keep them informed. Make sure their experience meets with their expectations. Do it early, do it often. And that way they keep hearing the repeated good news and they have this amazing customer experience with you. On the other hand, do the same exact thing. Keep giving them the good news, and when something changes and it isn't ideal, you give it to them absolutely as soon as possible, so both they and you have the ability to confer and make decisions about what it's going to take to meet their needs, truly. So regardless of whether they're the optimist or the pessimist, it still requires the same thing, and it sounds like you're doing that. And honestly, if I were buying your stuff, I'd love you too for that kind of attitude. So it's great stuff. And I already told you I like you, so that's no problem.
Well, just try to treat the customers the way I'd want to be treated as a customer.
Oh, the old golden rule.
No, it's true. I mean, look, if I buy something on Amazon, and I have an expectation, all right, it'll show up at my door in 2 days, and I'm not going to think about it anymore. But if I'm having somebody, our products, I don't feel that our products are commodities. Like, you're buying our expertise.
Of course.
And the if you buy, a toaster on Amazon and there's a problem, you just send it back, they'll send you a new one. We have a lot of people depending on the products we make. The communication systems, hardware integration, radar systems, satellite systems, all this stuff. It's like if we screw up, many people are affected by it. And so it's important that it's a higher level of stress for everybody.
It is.
And so it's like, again, how would I want to be treated if I was a project manager at one of these companies putting together a whole system, like a 19-inch rack system, and I got couplers and dividers and switches and amplifiers and all this stuff. If any one of those things, it could be a multi-million-dollar cabinet. If any one of those parts doesn't show up on time or has a defect, it's going to be a big problem. Sometimes there's even flow down clauses where they get penalized by their customer daily if they're late. So it's important that we just stay in communication.
Well, and I think that people forget something's very, very important. You think, well, I just need to be as good or better than my competitors. And you say that there's a lot of competitors out there. There's X number of people making the products that you make, which, relatively speaking, compared to the number of lawyers and roofers and all the ice cream shops that are in the country, there's a heck of a lot fewer of you than there are of those types of companies. But you think I need to be at least as good, if not the best, among my small number of competitors. But the truth be told, from the customer's perspective, every single customer experience, they are comparing you to every single vendor or service provider with whom they do business. Every single one. And the goal is not to be the best among your competitors. It's to be the best regardless of product or service. You want to be the best to say, you know what? I need to do business with Whirlpool Microwave. That you need to do business with Whirlpool Microwave. Hey, you, guy who sells me copy paper, you should do business the way Whirlpool Microwave does business, because they're that good. You know what? I've got this company in Jersey that I just freaking love, and they do compare you regardless of the product or service, whether you like it or not. And the sooner that entrepreneurs get that through their head, the better off they'll be, and the more they're going to invest in that client success and that experience.
Yeah.
So what's your end game? I mean, clearly you got the passion, clearly you got the leadership, and clearly you have the best interest of your customers in mind, and you're off to a great start in your still young journey of 8 years. What's your end game?
I always have trouble answering that. I mean, truth be told, I like where I'm at now, and I enjoy doing this. I would like to grow the company a little bit larger so that I would have more people handling the day-to-day things like the accounting and the bookkeeping and stuff like that. And then I could focus more on the product development and creativity. I'd like to get to the point where the day-to-day cash flow is not such a concern. Like, all right, if I do experiment, but if money was no object, man, I would just create anything. I would just be like, hey, all right, screw it. Let's just try this idea, see if this works, see what happens. Of course, we can't, we live in a practical world with limitations. You can't always do that. But, I mean, that's kind of it. I mean, I don't, if my energy ever drops at a point where I can't do this day to day, maybe I could stay on and do consulting or just do the more engineering type of stuff. But
Yeah.
as far as selling my business and running off to Hawaii or something, that's not on the radar. So
I love hearing that. Well, there's an elegance to it, and may your energy never wane, and may you always be able to carry this passion. But there's an elegance to it coming full circle. As with so many businesses, you started with the journey as a teenager, and that curiosity, that intellect, that passion, that dream. And it sounds to me like you want that all to come full circle all the way back so that you can have that feeling as a teenager again.
yeah,
Where I've grown the business, I've succeeded, I've helped others succeed, I've grown others along with me, and then I can go back to being that teenager pulling TVs apart
Yeah.
or experimenting and doing these things again. And I think that there's a certain poetry to it. And so I love hearing that sort of story,
yeah,
truly.
yeah. That's pretty accurate.
Well, that's great. That's great. So, as we talked about, in the context of growing your business, is there anything I can do any question I can answer for you?
I would say, when did you feel it, like whatever part of the business, like where you have to change your thinking?
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you find you had to just like reinvent yourself in the sense like, okay, what I'm doing has gotten me from this level to this level,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not going to get me to here. I have
Mm-hmm.
to totally change my mindset. What was an example maybe of that?
So the cool part is whether you are a career employee for someone or whether you're an entrepreneur, I think that there's one undeniable truth. And some of us learn it early. Some of us, it's just instinct, although I find that to be rare. And some of us learn it later in life. We have to be continually evolving. We have to be continually differentiating. That mindset needs to shift, grow, and be agile. So when did you need to do that? You need to do it, I'd say, at each stage of your life. You need to do it when you graduate school. You need to do it when you hit that next milestone. I'm engaged. I'm married. I have children. I've started a business. I take on a much higher leadership position. In each of those stages, there is a complete paradigm shift.
Yeah.
You take on a new level of responsibility. And in order to excel, you have to find a new way to differentiate yourself. So differentiate continuously, evolve continuously. But it's not some great big coup de grace. It's always keep your mind open, always keep your ear to the ground, and do little steps every single day to help yourself to evolve. It's one thing to do steps to get the tasks done in front of you. It's another thing to put those alongside of how I'm going to continue to evolve and grow and differentiate so that I can really be my best self. That applies as much to a career employee, a business, a person, a husband, a father, you name it.
Wow. Cool.
So when's the time to get started? Sounds like you're already on the journey. Just don't ever stop it.
Yeah, just continual improvement.
Well, and it's even more than improvement, right? We really have to really take a hard look at ourselves and say, I can get better doing these things I am, or I can look at things from a radically different perspective.
Well, I think
and say, I need to really take a hard look and be really, truly introspective and say, I'm willing to just erase the whiteboard and start over if that's what it takes.
That's hard because I think like people look for the new normal, as they say, and they kind of just settle in, and it's like, well, I mean, the classic example now is the internet, how it just changed the way business. Like no one uses fax machines anymore.
Absolutely.
But it's like yeah, people who didn't want to keep up with that,
yes,
they just got left behind.
And there are customers in brick and mortar and service businesses and entrepreneurs and older businesses who do not realize how technology has affected the buyer's journey. They do not realize that their customers think differently, that their customers buy differently, that their customers' desire for a particular customer experience has changed completely. I ask people this story all the time. I say, how do you shop for products? And overwhelmingly, it's, I prefer a self-service journey. I do a ton of research. I look at reviews. I do all this stuff. And I have a preference for faceless transactions.
Yeah.
Yet, when they get to their business, they go out there and they try and do just the opposite.
Yeah.
They say, well, we're going to go out and we're going to make 10,000 sales calls and we're going to do all the things that we've always done, and we're not going to recognize that the very thing that we want for our own buying journey for some reason doesn't apply to our customers. That's ridiculous. And if you're always looking at everything through the customer's lens, then your eyes are wide open. So, and I think you're on the way. So, well, I'd just like to tell you thank you so much. I told you I didn't bite. This wasn't going to be hard. And it's been, once again, I've had the pleasure of speaking with you a bunch lately, and I look forward to the next time. I'm so glad you joined me today. It's really been a pleasure, Ernest.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Everybody, if you are in the RF microwave business and you want to know about Werbel Microwave and Ernest Werbel, everything you need to know is going to be in the show notes. And folks, as always, thank you so much for sticking with me on the Revenue Fuel podcast. We'll catch you next time.